everyone, Pineapple here with Big Finish's Christmas box set, It's a Wonderful War and Other Stories. They previously released a Halloween special box set, and while the first two stories were solid, the last two left a lot to be desired. But here we have a much more positive time, fitting with the Christmassy theme. We start with the story Unholy Night by Noga Fleischon, a Missy adventure, the main role reprised by Michelle Gomez. Now Noga was with us last time with the Bramble King in the Halloween box set, a story that I thought was fine, but I didn't really find it to be outstanding. And I think they've done a much better job this time around in concept and execution. First of all, we'll talk about Missy herself, and I think this story is tailored perfectly to her character. The way the narrative sort of tortures and humiliates her without getting super dark is very targeted at who she is. And I think it's a great balance between comedy and existential despair, which might be the best way to describe Christmas when you have like that really racist uncle. Michelle Gomez is great comedically. She worked really well off of Kevin and Tom, and with how meh some stories have been in her series recently, this gives me new hope. It even takes her series' theme tune and makes it more Christmassy. I don't think this is done to any of the other themes as far as I can tell, but it works really well here. Our secondary protagonist is one of those Missy side character types who always have a 50-50 shot of Missy trying to kill them by the end, even though they're basically her companion, Kevin, played by Paul Brown. Now, he wasn't exactly exemplary, he's not in the majority of the story since it feels like most of it is flashbacks, but he does get a few laughs and I really like his bumbling everyman criminal energy. Next, we have one of the villains, the townsgoer who wants to marry Missy so hard he's basically playing out a Hallmark Christmas movie in Tom, played by Simon Kane, who's been in a few audios before, and while the character isn't amazing, he plays it excellently. The lumberjack simpleman, small town charm, and the sheer tropiness of the character's existence is hilariously portrayed and written, even if when in context with Missy's character, his constant identity as the Hallmark character is terrifying and mentally scarring to her. But much like the others, played really well, and great both comedically while able to be taken seriously. Finally, for important characters is Mary Evergreen, played by Frances Jeter, the mayor of Knoll Falls, an orchestrator of their malevolent Christmas plans. Much like the others, Mary is played perfectly, both while expositing her evil plan and when playing the mayor's facade. Being so accommodating and kind, it becomes freaky to the extreme, and that balance between horrifically Stepford and genuinely kind is written so well, especially with this character for most of the story. Sure, she's still good when outwardly evil and when being defeated, but the way the story can portray such kindness as sinister before it even becomes evil is handled best here. Now, as for the plot, we start with Kevin landing on the frosty planet Jewel, hunting down Missy, who had gone missing on the way to their latest criminal enterprise, and he finds her as a housewife in a village that is impressively and horrifically the perfect Christmas village. Once alone, Missy stops acting and tells Kevin everything through flashbacks that go on for a while, but it's all pretty good stuff. As she was passing the planet, a psychic force brought her down, and for weeks she's been trapped on the planet by the whole village's kindness. Wow, if I had a nickel for every Missy story where she's trapped on a planet inhabited by a psychic force and her vortex manipulator is rendered inert and I reviewed it,
I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice, right?
Whenever she tries to kill them, such as blowing up a bunch of children or stabbing Tom, who really wants her to leave her big city job for the quiet Christmas village life, but every time something goes awry and her efforts become disgustingly sweet and Christmas themed. Once Missy finishes the flashbacks and talks about how frustrated and weirded out she is, she feigned to be taken in by the village, biding her time till Kevin arrived. So they escape to his ship, but just like hers, it suspiciously refuses to take off. Missy decides now is the best time to snoop in Evergreen's office and get her weaponry back, encountering third act breakup tropes along the way. And while Kevin is basically hypnotized by Christmas cheer and a pretty girl, Missy, snooping in Evergreen's office, finds records of a long line of people before her becoming stranded and taken in, only to be replaced soon after. The story comes to a head as the town want to sacrifice Missy to the being that is keeping everyone living this happy, peaceful life. Apparently, this creature best digesting the people when they swell up with love and Christmas cheer, explaining why the village is like it is. So the town, people, and even the rules of the area, such as referencing how Missy was always unable to harm the townsfolk due to comedic circumstances, are all down to this force. In the end, Missy is fed to it, but it spits her back out as she made a deal, swapping herself with Evergreen, thinking maybe it's time that the villagers, who are all so full of happiness and cheer, take their own turn to feed the primordial giving one.
No Christmas spirit over here, I'm afraid. None. Zilch.
That's impossible. You've been in Noel Falls for weeks. How...
I don't know what to tell you. Just don't get it.
What's to get?
Any of it. The tinsel, the trees, the cookies.
Christmas is not about any of that stuff.
So overall, Unholy Night is a fun use of Hallmark Christmas tropes, intertwined with a classic use of the Missy makes everyone else miserable type story. With great characters, great comedy, even if I can feel it getting a little annoying if you aren't in the right mood, since the comedy can feel like it takes precedence over the plot at times. And while the execution of the story's non-linear structure could be a little frustrating with how long and uninterrupted it goes on, I think the story was fun enough to distract, so I'll give Unholy Night by Nogafleischon for me a 7.5 out of 10, but if you're mostly in the mood for a comedy, I think it could become an 8. Next up, we have Legacy of Blood by Julian Richards, and this one is a doozy. Sure, much like Sea Smoke and Other Stories, this set has peaked with the second story, but it does require a lot of homework, so much that not even myself as a massive Who nerd are fully informed. Of course, you can listen with limited information. I think the story does well enough to make the information exposited feel natural, but it would feel so much better paired with real knowledge. First of all, required is the background of Leela's story, heavily referencing moments that take place in the 4th season of Gallifrey, and since they're in another universe at that time, at least another season and a half till they make it back to Endspace. So for these episodes, I have heard all that's needed, but this story is also a crossover with the Jago and Lightfoot series, focusing on a major character and referencing the events of 2 specials in like 5 or 6 seasons. Sure, I've heard the specials, but the rest of Jago and Lightfoot lore is unknown to me. So while I enjoyed having Ellie here, it did feel a bit frustrating to have all these spoilers when I know I'm going to get to Jago and Lightfoot in the future. Anyway, the main character is Ellie Higson, a character often appearing with Jago and Lightfoot, played well by Lisa Bowerman. And she's really good in this story. A pretty good performance like the rest of the main characters, but the story starts with her as the lead role. She's been reminded of her old friends and been drawn to a remote village, a lingering connection to a man that temporarily made her vampiric. Now she is of course the outlier of the main characters, not a doctor or companion, but she isn't shirked. She gets a fair amount of time both active and with strong character moments. Next is the 6th Doctor, and seemingly in his more bitchy arc for a while, but between his moments of betrayal and peacekeeping, all of course portrayed well. But there are moments of stellar performance and writing when trying to stop more death taking place, and when sensing vampiric energy in Ellie and Leela, raging at being taken in by what he thinks are evil creatures wearing his friends' faces. It's all great stuff.
I should have seen it sooner, hiding behind the faces of my friends. But then that's how you hunt, isn't it?
Doctor!
That's how you brought the universe to its knees before the Time Lords drove you into the dark. And that's how you hurt me and so many people I've known. John, Ruth, Cassie. It's always the same.
Lastly for the main characters is Leela, reprised by Louise Jameson. And while much like the others having good interactions with the other 2 main characters, she probably has the best interactions with the antagonist, Ice Warrior Vanaxir. Since she's met the Ice Warriors before, and due to their shared warrior heritage, being a very good avenue to show the sympathetic side of Vanaxir, and explore him better beyond just being the badass idea of a vampiric Ice Warrior. The story opens with Ellie being drawn to the small town Dunstanton-on-Thames, helped along by Jago and Lightfoot's notes from their case-solving days. This Ellie seeming to be one that has unfortunately outlived her 2 dear friends due to her lingering vampiric qualities, confusing Six when he appears to see a friend that he thought should be long dead. Six is investigating something suspicious happening around the same time as an event held by the townspeople, who are celebrating a Green Night. So Ellie and Six pull resources, there being a really sweet scene where Six does his impression of Jago, Ellie sadly making him stop, still missing her friends. It's really goddamn depressing, but still sweet. While one of the townspeople, a pillar of the community, Mrs. Knight, played by Joanna Monroe, is busy being overwhelmed by her vampiric urges, Mrs. Brooke, played by Harriet Kershaw, is a lot more melancholic, trying to be more normal until the doctor starts sniffing around. And although she shifts the blame of his suspicions onto Mrs. Knight, the doctor is also onto her. Although seemingly not sensing that he's in danger enough to go into the middle of the ritual site in sacrificial robes to investigate the vampires surrounding him. Meanwhile, Ellie manages to save Leela, who has been trussed up in a coffin, and revealing what drew Ellie here: the lingering influence of a long-dead vampire who sired her, Gabriel Sanders. His influence having woken up the vampires of Dunstanton and turning them from good yet immortal neighbours back into murderous creatures. They manage to find the doctor and they escape, but not before the vampires have resurrected Vanaxia, who now starts killing all the vampires he can find, both as revenge on Gabriel and as mercy killings. Six, Leela and Ellie escape, but he has a crisis of faith as Vanaxia exclaimed that all humans at the site were vampires, picking up on the remnants in Leela and Ellie, causing Six to freak out from his vampire-induced trauma, referencing what sounds like goth opera and Hex's mother Cassie, making me wonder if Gabriel was somehow a precursor to the Forge. Anyway, Leela and the doctor fight, her unloading onto him and he relents, Mrs. Brooke coming in and expositing about their innocence until Gabriel's influence returned, while Leela gets cozy with Vanaxia. She finds commonalities with the Ice Warrior and the doctor discovers that he wasn't the only Ice Warrior that Gabriel experimented on. Vanaxia's actions due to a promise he made his father, ridding the world of vampires. Ready to continue killing them all, but eventually with a lot of talking and tense scenes, he stands down, allowing Six to work on a cure to this strain of vampirism, giving us a pretty happy ending, if not for all of the dead, well, undead. Now, the amount of backtracking and referencing in this story is certainly a detractor, especially when Big Finish usually doesn't inform you of what you need to hear. But honestly, even if the logistics were a bit confusing, the story still works and is a blast. Now, I may be ready to give Legacy of Blood by Julian Richards a 9.5 if I were fully into the history of these characters, but just having the background of Leela's part, I admit the listen wasn't perfect. So with all of the story's other positives in writing and performance, I'll give it a 9 out of 10. Now for the third story, Presence of Mind by Mark Wright, who we last heard with The Running Men. This is another story I haven't had the background for, being a story in the Smith and Sullivan range. First of all, where to start? Smith, or Sullivan. Well, we have Sadie Miller returning as Sarah Jane, her impression good, and while I can't vouch for how she and Lavinia gel in the other audios, the focus the story has on Sarah's past and how she views Lavinia's place in it is really interestingly done, and explored through their interactions and psychic visions. I thought all of that was pretty well done. As for the Sullivan, Harry is reprised by Christopher Naylor, and while he's just as funny, disarmingly charming, and bumbling as usual, pretty good in the episode, he's not at the emotional heart of it. Not so much that he's a side character, but he certainly feels a little stiffed, especially by Lavinia. Speaking of, Aunt Lavinia is reprised by Annette Badland from Smith and Sullivan, and she's a strange one. The performance is good and the emotional moments where she feels hurt or worries about Sarah are all performed well, but she is a bit of an oddball, a scientist that doesn't feel well about Sarah hanging with Eunice and is kind of dismissive of the whole aliens thing. I always enjoy an Annette Badland performance, but Lavinia is just a little odd and I just don't really get her. But the emotional moments work well, and although sometimes frustrating, a lot of her quips are at least slightly humorous. Also along for the ride is John Leeson returning as K9. I don't really have much to say about him. He also isn't in the emotional heart of the story, but in the writing and performance I didn't find any problems. As for the plot, our three humans and robot dog are going home for Christmas. Lavinia quite irritable that Harry is tagging along, but the train they're on suddenly freezes, as do all the people along with it, leaving just the four of them active. The imagery is pretty effective, but they start getting visions, eventually ending up trapped in said visions, held hostage in a stone circle in the cold, channeled through Harry's gift to Sarah, something they picked up on their travels. Now, out of the four stories, I'll be honest, the actual plot here is probably the simplest, and the one that kind of left my mind the quickest. and I admit it wasn't my favourite, but what really works for me here is Sarah and Lavinia. Sarah is a dear and interesting character for me, as the Sarah Jane Adventures was as much a part of my formative years as Doctor Who, and her time on Doctor Who often watched by me as a young'un on DVD. And considering one of the best stories in her show was around her parents, exploring her relationship with Lavinia, and the theme of adoption / found family being so drenched in that show, this story was bound to speak to me at least a little with its connection here. So even if I wasn't enamored with the plot, the character's performance and heart of the story are very good, so I'll give Presence of Mind by Mark Wright a 7 out of 10. Lastly, we have It's a Wonderful War by Jonathan S. Powell, who wrote the unfortunate middle episode of Planet Crinoid, and this story is an odd one. The story mostly focuses around the 8th Doctor, and he's great in it. His optimism and fight for the best outcome to save as many people as he can, while his Time Lord adversary wants to let the people be killed to stop their suffering, and the dichotomy between them is really interesting. But while Paul McGann's performance is great, this other Time Lord, actually being the War Doctor in disguise, as his superior, played by Andrew Wincott, played pretty well, even though Jonathan Carley does get a cameo near the end. So he isn't completely ignored, and although you understand the War Doctor's motive and outlook, it does make him look and feel like a massive arsehole. And yes, his whole thing is he isn't the Doctor, but it did leave a real bad taste in my mouth looking back on it. But not enough that the story's a deal breaker. The story itself is quite interesting, but I do admit the first third of listening I spent mostly trying to get my bearings. We have a kind of It's a Wonderful Life theme going on, but also the story starts with Veclin, reprised by Beth Chalmers, and her superior sending the Doctor on a mission, and then after that a narrator comes in. So I admit I spent about the first third of the story just trying to figure out what the story was going for. But once it gets established and in its stride, I admit it got pretty interesting. The story focuses on Galen Smith, played by Richard David Kane, a boy on a mining colony where no one ever leaves, and he wants to leave. Have you ever heard of such a thing? There's a very big focus on his choices and how choices affect the world around you, which I guess is kind of a take on the what if I were never born trope, as he takes away materials every day ready to build a rocket and fly away, willing to leave everything behind just to see the stars, willing to leave his father and his friend Sharla, played by Cassie Bradley. Now just before he has achieved his dream, his father untimely passes away, and this leaving the miners his father was the foreman of in a rage, and Galen having visions to another universe filled with Daleks, has Galen choose to stay when an agent of a mining corporation, actually the War Doctor, is ready to take control and send Galen on his way. But he takes his father's role and eventually marries Sharla. The story is quite a sweet one, until the Doctor and the War Doctor start meddling more and more. Galen starting to see horrible visions of all the asteroid's people, including his wife, turning into Daleks. While 8 just wants Galen to get straight to the point and save everyone, the War Doctor won't let it happen so easily, forcing Galen to confront the fact that he isn't real. He is in fact a false personality, and the reality the War Doctor wants to win out of the two is the one filled with Daleks, the Daleks in the usual reality having come to the asteroid to use its fantastic minerals, explaining the lovely Christmas-themed Dalek on the cover, and Galen being a Time Lord agent that was sent to investigate. There's a little hiccup where Galen locks the Doctors together and runs away with his wife, 1 second ready to choose the War Doctor's side and then against him, only for his wife to eventually ask him to pick the Dalek reality. Because if the good world solidifies and the Daleks manage to invade it, Sharla has already felt the pain of becoming a Dalek in that other timeline, and she doesn't wish to feel it again, or let their newly born daughter be put through the same. This story is quite good with its multiple points of horror, of course the obvious body horror, but also the despair when Galen picks the Dalek reality. Becoming a Time Lord again, the agent of the War Doctor was sent to retrieve from this failing alternate timeline that was created around him by a device, which also manifested the false personality along with it, and he leaves completely dismissing Sharla and their baby, becoming the opposite of the man she married, just someone else wearing his face. Now the 8th Doctor isn't done, refusing to let the people return back to Daleks, so using all that is left of Galen, his daughter, he just manages to stabilize this reality, stopping the Daleks from penetrating the asteroid. The narrator finally explained, played by Rosemary Ash, actually being Galen's child, telling the story to her descendant. But of course the story is more poetic with the angel and the shadow instead of the doctors. But as long as the story is told and remembered by the people of the asteroid, it seems their reality will always exist safe and secluded, giving these people long, happy lives, a little convoluted but a lovely ending.
Yes, come on, please. Just give me this, please. Just this.
Doctor, what's happening?
Oh, Charlotte Smith. I do believe it's Christmas.
On the other end, the ward doctor returns with the uncaring Galen, revealing the reason 8 was there is that Veclan screwed up when contacting the doctor and sent it earlier than she wanted. A real Christmas miracle. And so the ward doctor departs, thinking those people were spared more pain, and 8 leaves, knowing these people live and Galen's story is remembered even if the Time Lord underneath doesn't. Overall, It's a Wonderful War was a bit of an unenthusiastic and confused listen for the start, but once getting past that, it becomes a great, if jargon-laden story about heart over nihilism, and a great character piece for one doctor, and pretty good for the other. So I'll give It's a Wonderful War by Jonathan S. Powell a good 7 out of 10. A good story, but getting to that heart took me a bit of trifling. That leaves Christmas, It's a Wonderful War and Other Stories with a 7.6 out of 10, above Halloween's Sea Smoke and Other Stories 6.25 score. And while that set had 2 stumbles, all of these stories are at least good, even if some speak to me more than others. So if you're in the Christmassy mood, I'd give this set a listen. Thank you everybody for watching my review of It's a Wonderful War and Other Stories. A Merry Christmas to you all. Please like the video if you liked it. Comment down below if you wish, consider subscribing to the channel, and if you do, ring the notification bell so that you're told every single time that I make an upload. Once again, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next review. Bye!
Toast. A little piece of toast. Because there's so much to choose from. There's brown bread, white bread, all sorts of wholemeal bread. It comes in funny packages with writing on the side.